we haven't got the money to put developments on the car. That was what Toto Wolff said after Mercedes was defeated again by McLaren in the Dutch Grand Prix, with Lando Norris winning and Kimi Antonelli and George Russell second and third. John Noble, are things as bleak as they sound for Mercedes?
It's a fascinating dynamic now to this Formula One title battle. Mercedes has been all season talked about playing the long game, holding back on developments, keeping its spare cash available for an aggressive development war second half of the season. But we appeared in Zandvoort, nothing much on that Mercedes this weekend, a revised brake drum. It's been defeated by McLaren, which brought the second part of his upgrade here. It's proved effective. Norris, brilliant form, high-speed performance. The McLaren now is class leading. Mercedes obviously needs to respond. Lando still far back, but 2 wins now on the bounce. But Toto says there's no money for development, which is intriguing in itself because it's a development war. So what are Mercedes planning? What are they playing to? And we don't really know why, because they've been quite low-key so far in terms of bringing upgrades all season.
And we have to remember that there's a certain degree of lag in the system. Now, we do know there are some upgrades that are in the pipeline, as it were. So we think what Toto means, or we know what Toto means by that, is that we can't respond to what we're seeing from McLaren and to an extent Ferrari as well, which has developed effectively. So it doesn't mean there's going to be nothing new. There'll probably be perhaps one more fairly substantial upgrade to come for them, but it means they're, in a way, sitting ducks.
Yeah, I think what Toto basically means is that they can't respond in the way you would normally. That if you've seen your rivals close up, as McLaren has, it's made a big leap these last 2 races, you would fast track any upgrades you've got, you'd fast track your development, you'd get it on that car as soon as possible. As Ferrari's Fred Vasseur said earlier on in the season, if you've got 2 or 3 temps development potential, bring it in 3 races earlier. It's 3 races, you've got it. At some point you don't want to keep waiting because you run out of time to benefit from it. So this is the key issue now facing Mercedes, is what have they got coming, when have they got it coming, and why are they struggling so much on spending? Did they spend too much at the start of the season? Have they been inefficient in terms of developments they've brought so far? Or are they saving it all for a blockbuster end to the season?
What was interesting is I put what Toto Wolff said to Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, after the race about not having the money for developments, and Andrea Stella said, well, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. Not aimed at me, but just the premise that Mercedes won't have upgrades. And interestingly, he talked about the $3 million headroom under the cost cap. Now, we have done a video about this before, but it's worth reviewing exactly what Andrea Stella meant by that, and whether Mercedes has access to that, or whether it's what Mercedes wants to use on something else and doesn't have to dip into. Is there something wider going on in terms of their cost cap strategy, their spending strategy?
Yeah, this relates to the change in regulations for 2027 and 28. As part of a move to improve these new rules that haven't really worked in the 50-50 format, we're moving towards a 60-40 power split between the IC and electrical power. That requires an increase in fuel flow. Increased fuel flow means you burn more fuel. And for teams that have spent a lot in 26, as Mercedes appears to have done, that could mean a bigger fuel tank for next year if you want to finish races. So an agreement was reached. Involves 2 allowances for the cost cap, a $3 million spending over this season and next season. And you can choose how it's split. You can do $3 million this year, save it $3 million for next year, or do 1.5, and another 3 for 27 and 28. So there's $6 million in the pot, 3 million potentially this year. But in theory, you could spend on upgrades if you were desperate to. But then if you need it to revise your chassis for a fuel tank, or you need it longer term, you're in trouble because that spending has then gone. So what we don't know is if Mercedes has availability does it pull some of this budget forward to do it? Has it already committed to the production schedule for everything? Or did it simply come into the start of the season super aggressive in terms of its development upgrades? Australia, it was one of the first to bring a big package for the first race. Hope to get the championship, hope to build up a big enough advantage in the championship that you put others off developing, because this is how many titles are won. But its plan fell through because of poor reliability that has brought Ferrari and brought McLaren into the game.
Yeah, you wouldn't be entirely surprised if the team decided that it just hits it really hard early on, builds up a big lead, and then cruises to the title. And they've still got a substantial advantage. You know, Lando Norris is a long way back in that championship fight, and Lewis Hamilton's there as well. But what is interesting is there is clear evidence that Mercedes have done less developing. Now, they have to declare all of their aerodynamic upgrades. Anything that's an aerogeometry change is officially declared. Now, all upgrades are not equal, but if you just total up the number of individual upgrades that have been declared across every team, joint bottom of the list are Williams, who we know have got a big upgrade coming for Baku, and Mercedes on 24 upgrades. And that does broadly tally with what we've seen in terms of the substance of the upgrades as well, because you know that a small change to a fairing on the front suspension is not worth as much as a whole floor and doesn't cost as much either.
Yeah, we've been through the figures. So if you go through the FIA figures of the upgrades, Red Bull and McLaren, FIA say 38 upgrades over the season. Ferrari bought 40 and Mercedes has 24. But we did some calculations tonight on the bit of a piece of paper I have in my hand here. And if you weight it based on, you know, an upgrade for a new floor, for example, costs a lot more than a new mirror shroud. So if you weight it in terms of how much spending there is, we calculate Red Bull's led the way on development on 25, which is why Laura Meckers has talked about winding things down the second half of the season.
That's our point system, isn't it? 25.
Yeah, 25. And then McLaren about 23, we estimate. Ferrari 21. And we put Mercedes down at about 15 in terms of our points tally, which is a lag in front of everyone, which suggests they've spent less than everybody, which makes it quite strange as to why then they aren't able to be more aggressive with the development, unless there is this end of season strategy to go all in and try and nail this championship in the final rounds when they hope others stop spending.
And they are still in a good position. Now, McLaren have kicked on hugely impressively. They had kind of the second half of that upgrade they started in Zandvoort. No, they started it in Hungary before the break, and they finished it here in Zandvoort. And this was the lesser part of it, I think it's fair to say, but still a handy step. But crucially, it worked. And Andrea Stella was saying, well, I think actually we saw today Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren probably all within a tenth of each other. But the McLaren is very quick, and it was able to win today primarily because Lando Norris was mega quick on those hard Pirellis that you could get pace out of, but they were very hard to get the max out of. But it does look like McLaren is in very, very good shape.
Yeah, that upgrade they brought to Hungary part one and a second part here has definitely lifted their pace in high-speed corners. We saw it in the telemetry data here, turns 7 and 8, much better than everybody else. Medium speed, they're kind of on a par. Slow speed, Ferrari are still the best. Mercedes are quite consistent across the speed range. So the McLaren's not a perfect car. They need to address the slow speed traction as well, and that can lead to the tyre degradation we saw in the sprint on Saturday. So there's work to do, there's improvements to do, but Andrea Stella, when we spoke to him this weekend, he said that, you know, you bring an upgrade and it delivers. You don't necessarily aim for a specific speed range. It's happened to have placed them brilliant step in high speed. They would have traded some of that off for a bit of a gain in low speed, but they think they can now address that low speed without it being a compromise at the top. So I think they've pushed on, and they obviously made some tweaks between the sprint and the main race this weekend to just improve that low speed weakness, the sliding, the increased traction, and it worked today because Lando came through brilliantly.
And Monza could be a different story because, as Andrea Stella said, that's a track that plays more to the weaknesses of the McLaren. It's a little bit draggy. It's not necessarily the absolute best on the brakes and in the slow chicanes, but that's going to be a good test. But do you believe that Mercedes can't respond to this? Do you think the die is cast development-wise? Or do you think there could be a way, maybe with that extra allowance they've got to think, do you know what, we need to, as Andrea Stella puts it, cash in and put a few new extra bits, develop a few new extra bits for the Mercedes to fight back against the resurgence of Ferrari and McLaren?
I think this is a typical F1 development war, but in F1 26 it's going to be like a chess game. But it's not going to be about who can bring the best and the most as fast as possible. It's when you do your spending, when you bring your development. Mercedes has decided to, go slow, be the tortoise in some respects, and bring developments in tactically. That's why it chose Melbourne. That's why it chose Montreal. in a bid to, so when you need new parts in, you need to refresh your floor, for example. The cheapest thing is to refresh your floor with an upgraded floor, because you're not then building extra floors. So they've got their limitations. They won't tell us what their plan is in terms of the upgrades and developments. I'm absolutely convinced they have things in the pipeline. We spoke to Bradley Law, their deputy team principal, before the summer break. He said there's some very promising developments coming through the wind tunnel. The understanding is there, the potential is there. The key thing is when it comes. Monza, Kimi Antonelli is taking a grid penalty, so he's going to start from the back of the grid. So do you waste an upgrade then or not? And it's not really the track that's ideal for more downforce. You can question whether Madrid is the right place. But I'm sure around that time, Mercedes will unleash an upgrade. It's probably going to be a big upgrade. And then the question really will be not just what they do, it's whether others like McLaren and Ferrari, do they still have the spending power to bring that in? Do they need to dig into this extra 3 million themselves and get this title fight all the way to the final round, wherever that takes place?
And that's the great thing. Mercedes may have a big points lead, but there's a real battle going on, a good old-fashioned development war, a war on track as well, and that's what we all want to see. We're going to find out how it plays out over the next few months.